Chapter 17 and 18 of The Way of All Flesh. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rhonda Fetterman. The Way of All Flesh by Samuel Butler. Chapter 17. In the course of time this sorrow was removed. At the beginning of the 5th year of her married life, Christina was safely delivered of a boy. This was on the 6th of September, 1835. Word was immediately sent to old Mr. Pontifex, who received the news with real pleasure. His son John's wife had borne daughters only, and he was seriously uneasy lest there should be a failure in the male line of his descendants. The good news, therefore, was doubly welcome, and caused as much delight at Elmhurst as dismay in Woburn Square, where the John Pontifexes were then living. Here, indeed, this freak of fortune was felt to be all the more cruel on account of the impossibility of resenting it openly. But the delighted grandfather cared nothing for what the John Pontifexes might feel or not feel. He had wanted a grandson, and he had got a grandson, and this should be enough for everybody. And now that Mrs. Theobald had taken to good ways, she might bring him more grandsons, which would be desirable, for he should not feel safe with fewer than 3. He rang the bell for the butler. "Gelstrap," he said solemnly, "I want to go down into the cellar." Then Gelstrap preceded him with a candle, and he went into the inner vault where he kept his choicest wines. He passed many bins. There was 1803 port, 1792 imperial Tokay, 1800 claret, 1812 sherry. These and many others were passed, but it was not for them that the head of the Pontifex family had gone down into his inner cellar. A bin, which had appeared empty until the full light of the candle had been brought to bear upon it, was now found to contain a single pint bottle. This was the object of Mr. Pontifex's search. Gelstrap had often pondered over this bottle. It had been placed there by Mr. Pontifex himself about a dozen years previously, on his return from a visit to his friend the celebrated traveller, Dr. Jones. But there was no tablet above the bin which might give a clue to the nature of its contents. On more than one occasion when his master had gone out and left his keys accidentally behind him, as he sometimes did, Gelstrap had submitted the bottle to all the tests he could venture upon, but it was so carefully sealed that wisdom remained quite shut out from that entrance at which he would have welcomed her most gladly, and indeed from all other entrances, for he could make out nothing at all. And now the mystery was to be solved. But alas, it seems as though the last chance of securing even a sip of the contents was to be removed for ever, for Mr. Pontifex took the bottle in his own hands and held it up to the light after carefully examining the seal. He smiled and left the bin with the bottle in his hands. Then came a catastrophe. He stumbled over an empty hamper. There was the sound of a fall, a smash of broken glass, and in an instant the cellar floor was covered with the liquid that had been preserved so carefully for so many years. With his usual presence of mind, Mr. Pontifex gasped out a month's warning to Gelstrap. Then he got up and stamped as Theobald had done when Christina had wanted not to order his dinner. "It's water from the Jordan," he exclaimed furiously, "which I have been saving for the baptism of my eldest grandson. Damn you, Gelstrap, how dare you be so infernally careless as to leave that hamper littering about the cellar?" "I wonder the water of the sacred stream did not stand upright as an heap upon the cellar floor and rebuke him." Gelstrap told the other servants afterward that his master's language had made his backbone curdle. The moment, however, that he heard the word water, he saw his way again and flew to the pantry. Before his master had well noted his absence, he returned with a little sponge and a basin, and had begun sopping up the waters of the Jordan as though they had been a common slop. "I'll filter it, sir," said Gelstrap meekly. "It'll come quite clean." Mr. Pontifex saw hope in this suggestion, which was shortly carried out by the help of a piece of blotting paper and a funnel under his own eyes. Eventually it was found that half a pint was saved, and this was held to be sufficient. Then he made preparations for a visit to Battersby. He ordered goodly hampers of the choicest eatables. He selected a goodly hamper of choice drinkables. I say choice, and not choicest, for although in his first exultation he had selected some of his very best wine, yet on reflection he had felt that there was moderation in all things, and as he was parting with his best water from the Jordan, he would only send some of his second best wine. Before he went to Battersby he stayed a day or two in London, which he now seldom did, being over 70 years old, and having practically retired from business. The John Pontifexes, who kept a sharp eye on him, discovered to their dismay that he had had an interview with his solicitors. Chapter 18. For the first time in his life, Theobald felt that he had done something right, and could look forward to meeting his father without alarm. The old gentleman indeed had written him a most cordial letter, announcing his intention of standing godfather to the boy. Nay, I may as well give it in full, as it shows the writer at his best. It runs: "Dear Theobald, your letter gave me very sincere pleasure, the more so because I had made up my mind for the worst. Pray accept my most hearty congratulations for my daughter-in-law and for yourself. I have long preserved a vial of water from the Jordan for the christening of my first grandson, should it please God to grant me one. It was given me by my old friend Dr. Jones. You will agree with me that though the efficacy of the sacrament does not depend upon the source of the baptismal waters, yet, ceteris paribus, there is a sentiment attaching to the waters of the Jordan which should not be despised. Small matters like this sometimes influence a child's whole future career. I shall bring my own cook, and have told him to get everything ready for the christening dinner. Ask as many of your best neighbours as your table will hold. By the way, I have told Lesueur not to get a lobster. You had better drive over yourself and get one from Saltness," for Battersby was only 14 or 15 miles from the sea-coast. "They are better there, at least I think so, than anywhere else in England. I have put your boy down for something in the event of his attaining the age of 21 years. If your brother John continues to have nothing but girls, I may do more later on, but I have many claims upon me, and am not as well off as you may imagine. Your affectionate father, G. Pontifex." A few days afterwards the writer of the above letter made his appearance in a fly, which had brought him from Gildenham to Battersby, a distance of 14 miles. There was Lesueur, the cook, on the box with the driver, and as many hampers as the fly could carry were disposed upon the roof and elsewhere. Next day the John Pontifexes had to come, and Eliza and Maria, as well as Alethea, who by her own special request was godmother to the boy, for Mr. Pontifex had decided that they were to form a happy family party. So come they all must, and be happy they all must, or it would be the worse for them. Next day the author of all this hubbub was actually christened. Theobald had proposed to call him George, after old Mr. Pontifex, but strange to say, Mr. Pontifex overruled him in favour of the name Ernest. The word Ernest was just beginning to come into fashion, and he thought the possession of such a name might, like his having been baptized in water from the Jordan, have a permanent effect upon the boy's character, and influence him for good during the more critical periods of his life. I was asked to be his second godfather.